In this video, I'll be testing the Z Flip 5's capability of lasting a full day with a single charge. This phone has an uphill battle considering it has a 3700 mAh battery. I've already had a few phones either barely make it or not make it to the day, and they've all had bigger batteries than this one. So let's see how this one behaves. The difference with this phone is that I basically ran the test 3 times. One using the flex window only, another using the main screen only, and also I ran it using the light mode to see if any of those made a difference. At the end, the numbers that I'm going to be using are for the test that I use the main screen only, because that's going to be my benchmark for flip phones. So my first run was while using the flex window only, and I'm glad that the phone captures the screen on time with the flex window as well. This let me capture some accurate numbers to go along with it. The best way I can describe watching videos and using certain apps on the flex window is kind of like if you were using them in portrait mode. For example, when you're watching YouTube on full screen on the flex window, it's going to have very similar dimensions to when you're watching it on portrait mode, where you're basically limited to how wide the screen is and you can't really make it any bigger without cropping into the picture. Depending on the content, what I do when watching videos on the flex window is that I crop in to fill in the screen. This works especially well with podcasts or other videos where they keep most of the focus on the center third of the screen, and actually is not too bad of an experience. However, on anything that requires you to view the whole thing, you're back to a smaller viewing experience. For other apps like Spotify that have widgets for the flex window, you're not really missing out on anything because they've already designed the widget for the cover screen, or at least Samsung has optimized it to fit on the flex window. Of course, there are times when you just can't avoid opening the phone to use the main screen. One of them being recording video and taking pictures of something in front of you. Other than that, I basically use the flex window for everything. So I responded to all my messages using the flex window, and the typing experience on the flex window is actually pretty good. The keyboard is a little bit smaller, but with the phone closed, you get a really good grip on the phone, and it's actually pretty comfortable when typing. So for quick replies, using the flex window is probably my preferred method. Another thing that I noticed is that the icon to hide the keyboard is actually appearing now on the flex window, which definitely helps with the experience. So overall, spending a full day with the flex window was actually not too bad. We just missed out on using the full screen on certain apps. So without giving away the final screen on time figures, the phone did pretty good until I started using the camera. The camera drained the battery faster than any other app that I used, which probably makes sense, especially when capturing 4K video. But I just found it interesting that it was actually doing fairly decent until the camera started being used. I spent the next day using the phone in light mode. Based on the description, it limits the processor to 70% max and prioritizes the temperature over processing speed. For the most part, I didn't notice that light mode was being used at all. All the swiping gestures and phone navigation felt perfectly fine, super crisp. I didn't feel any of the apps take longer, really. Everything felt normal using the light mode. Another note on night mode is that the description says that it won't interfere with gaming. So you can actually leave it on and play a game, and it's gonna disregard the light mode and just let you power through it and play the game normally. So it's really something you could leave on and not have to worry about switching off for a certain task. But does it make enough of a difference on screen on time that it's worth keeping on? That we'll find out at the end. And my final day was using the main screen only without light mode on. So it was basically worst case scenario for this phone. For the most part, using the main screen only is not an issue. I placed it on a stand and left the phone open like if it was a regular slab phone when it was on my desk. And the only time I would fold it up was when I was gonna move it around or place it in my pocket to keep the inner screen safe. And really, you can use these phones that way. And for the most part, that's how I do use it. Except that I got a pet now, so I gotta be a little more careful. So depending on if they're being crazy or not, I would close it at that point just to keep the inner screen safe. So as I would expect, the experience of watching videos on the main screen is obviously better than the flex window. You turn it sideways for full screen and you get a much bigger viewing experience. You also get a little bit more of that stereo sound because you get the left and right speakers when you turn it into landscape view, versus when you have it in portrait view, all the sound is coming straight from the top or bottom, or if using flex window, then it's only coming from the bottom. So in terms of being more immersed into the video or game, using the main screen is obviously the way to go. The only thing about the main screen experience for this phone is, since the aspect ratio is super tall, there's a lot of wasted space when it comes to watching videos. Obviously, for other apps where you're reading articles or you're doing a budget or whatever, it's not going to be a negative because you're just going to see more of the app at one time. So that's perfectly fine. And the width is actually fine for me. I don't mind the slightly thinner profile. Only video apps have a negative side effect of the form factor or the aspect ratio. And even then, it's not that big a deal. It's just a slightly smaller viewing experience, even though you have technically a 6.7-inch screen. But continuing with the main screen only experience, the battery held up pretty decent when I was just watching videos. And again, the camera is what drained the battery super fast. By the end of it, I was so surprised at the results that it didn't make sense to me based on, just thinking about how things work. Using light mode, I would expect that reducing the power of the processor or that the processor can use, I would expect it to do better. And with the flex window, you have a smaller screen, so you have less pixels that need to be lit up. So technically, it should use less battery. With all that, the screen on time was almost the same, basically the same for all three experiences. So what comes to mind is that the light mode didn't really affect anything because the apps don't really use more than 70% of the processor for the most part, maybe small blips here and there, but overall, it's not making that much of a difference. And the flex window portion still has me a bit confused as to why it didn't really improve the life overall, the screen on time overall. What this is telling me is just use the phone however you see fit, however it makes you happier, because it really makes almost no difference in how you use it in terms of battery life. By the time all the tests were done, the average screen on time at 20% was 4 hours and 45 minutes. And the fact that they were all within 5 minutes of each other at that point was surprising to me. Unfortunately, on neither of those days did the phone reach a full day's worth of battery, which I was kind of expecting anyway. By the time the phone reached 5% battery, which is my threshold for failing, the Z Flip 5 was actually further away from a full day than the Pixel Fold. So it kind of seems like the top half of the battery is going down at a slower rate than the bottom half. That's probably due to programming. But basically, at the end of the day, it didn't last as long as the Pixel Fold, which makes perfect sense considering the huge battery size difference. But I still give it credit for putting close to the same amount of screen on time at 20%. I'm interested in seeing where the Z Flip 6 comes out, considering that it's not too far away in the future. And I'll be happy to test that one out. As of now, if you're using the phone more than 4 hours a day, it likely won't last you a full day. But I would say these results are expected since this is not exactly a heavy user's form factor. This is more of a minimalist user or a light user's form factor. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Were you surprised at the numbers that I got on the screen on time? And what is your experience with the phone if you do have it? Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.